Okay, we find ourselves in Shmuel Bet Perek Zion, and we are discussing the question of why David HaMelech was not permitted to build the Beit HaMikdash. So towards the beginning of this Perek, we're told, Vayomer HaMelech al Natan HaNavi, Re'eh na anochi yoshev b'Beit Arazim, v'Aaron HaElokim yoshev b'toch ha'iriyah. So David says to Natan the Navi, look, I dwell in a house of cedar wood. Cedar wood was a very expensive wood in those days that was imported from Lebanon. So David says, look, I feel uncomfortable. I live in this nice palace of cedar wood. And meanwhile, the Aron of Hashem is in Uriah. Uriah, some sort of a curtain. So picture a temporary structure like a tent. Right? The Mishkan was always a temporary structure. At this point, the Mishkan that stood for many years in Shiloh has already been destroyed. The Beit HaMikdash has not been rebuilt. So the Aron is dwelling in some sort of a very temporary tent structure. And David says, this makes me uneasy that me, the human king, I get a Beit Arazim. And meanwhile, the Aron of God is in this very temporary tent. So Natan initially likes this suggestion. So Natan's initial response to David is, yeah, if that's how you feel, go ahead and build this Beit HaMikdash, build this temple, this palace for God, just like you have a human palace. But then God tells him otherwise. That evening Hashem appears to Natan, and he tells Natan, not so fast. Go tell David he's not going to build me a Beit HaMikdash. And we tried here to understand the nature of Hashem's answer to Natan. And so we took this parak and this question, why did David not build the Beit HaMikdash? We broke it down into different sections. The answer, Hashem's answer to Natan to give to David begins in Pasuk Hey. And we noted over here the first couple of psukim in this response, Hey Vav and Zion, question whether God needs a physical home at all. He says to Natan, go tell David, that hey, ha'ata makes it a question. Are you going to build a house for me to dwell in? Ever since I took Bnei Israel out of Mitzrayim, I've never lived in a permanent home. I've always been in an ohel or a mishkan, a tent like he is now, or maybe a mishkan which was a bit more of a structure. There was wood in the mishkan, but it was still portable. It wasn't a fixed building in one place. And Hashem says, look, that worked. Whenever I wandered, right, Hashem, he means he wandered here, because, like mitalech over there, he wandered because he was dwelling in a tent or a mishkan, and all my wanderings with Bnei Israel, hadavar dibarti, again that question, hey, did I ever speak anything to any of the shvatim, to any of the people who I commanded to shepherd Bnei Israel, right, any of the leaders? There weren't so many kings before David, only Shaul. But did I ever say to any of the earlier shepherds, any of the earlier leaders of Bnei Israel, Moshe, Yehoshua, Ehud, Gideon, did I ever tell any of them, Lama lo v'nitem li beit arazim? How come you didn't build me a cedar palace? I never asked for one. So the first reason Hashem seems to give for why he doesn't want David to build a Beit HaMikdash is that Hashem does not need a Beit HaMikdash at all. And he seems to be contrasting himself here with David, the human king, and perhaps identifying a bit with some of the human leaders who were not kings, who were more like temporary tribal leaders or religious leaders like Nevi'im. That Hashem says we used to have all these other leaders who were kind of like shepherds. They just kind of tended to the flock. They tended to Bnei Israel. I never asked them to build me a palace. And note how he mentions a palace of cedar wood, exactly what David has. As if to say, look, you think you're different because you have a palace, unlike all the earlier leaders who were Shoftim or Nevi'im. And so you think somehow I'm different now, that now I'm going to be a spiritual king like you're a human king, and I need a palace just like you need a palace. I don't need a palace. I'm not like that. I'm a leader of Bnei Israel, more in the model of some of the earlier leaders. Am Yisrael has a long history of human leaders, as well as Hashem, their God, who led them without the trappings of a king, without a palace. Then Hashem does something a little interesting later on in this prophecy, in Yud Bet and Yud Gimel. Right? See, if we'd only read section 1 over here, we'd think that David shouldn't build a Beit HaMikdash, because nobody should build a Beit HaMikdash. Hashem doesn't need or want one. And yet here, we look in the next segment of the prophecy, and I just excerpted 2 psukim from it, where Hashem says, Eventually, you're going to lie with your fathers, meaning you're going to die. And then I'm going to appoint your descendants, your seed, your offspring instead of you. I'm going to make his kingship established, firmly established. Hachinoti, the word kin, which we today think of as the meaning yes in modern Hebrew, it originally means established. So to the word nachon, which we use today to say that something is correct, like if I answer yes to a question, I might say nachon, kin. Originally it meant that the answer is it's correct because it's firmly established to be true. So hachinoti is that same root. I'm going to firmly establish your kid's kingship. Right? So you, David, are the first king, but your kid is going to be firmly established. He's going to build me my house, my temple. I'm going to establish his royal throne forever. So this sounds a little different. This doesn't sound like Hashem doesn't want a palace. This sounds like Hashem could appreciate a fancy temple like a Beit HaMikdash, but only from David's son. And the reason David's son is different than David is because somehow David's son is going to be more firmly established. So we suggested in class that point 1 and point 2 here are connected to each other. Fundamentally, Hashem doesn't need a home like a palace. He doesn't need a Beit HaMikdash. But Hashem is sort of setting up a parallel here between him as our God and the type of human leadership that we have. So in an era of Nevi'im and Shoftim leading us, when we were led by people like Moshe, Yehoshua, Ehud, Gideon, all the way through Shmuel, so every generation a new leader would come up. It's kind of like a temporary form of leadership, because when that guy died, his kids would not take over. And he would lead whatever Shvatim were in his region of Eretz Yisrael for that time. And so too, Hashem was more than happy to also kind of move around from Shevet to Shevet in this temporary structure that just had the Aron, which symbolized his presence, and whatever type of curtain or tent structure they had. As we're transitioning to monarchy and having human leadership that dwells in a palace, that dwells in a Beit Arazim, so basically David was right that it makes sense as we transition to that, this firmly established human leader, to have our God also be in a palace of sorts, what we call the Beit HaMikdash, Hashem's temple, Hashem's palace. Otherwise there'd be this awkward disparity that the human leader, the king, is in more luxurious accommodations than Hashem. So in that sense, David's instinct kind of was right to build the temple, but Hashem wanted him to understand that unlike a human king, he doesn't really need this. He doesn't need a home of any type in the way that a human king does. And so he doesn't let David himself build this, and he sends this first message to David of saying, don't make the mistake of thinking, I need this Beit HaMikdash the way that you think you need your palace. I've been fine without one as well. On the other hand, it is true that as we move towards monarchy and towards royal palaces, Hashem should have a respectable dwelling place. But Hashem says, I want that to be done, not just the moment we get a human king, but when we have a human dynasty. A human dynasty symbolizes a permanence of leadership. One king dies and his son takes over. And so, David is moving more towards a permanent leadership by being a king with a palace, but it's only when he dies and Shlomo succeeds him that you're going to say that we've fully transitioned to the stable, permanent monarchy through one dynasty. And so when that happens, when there's not only the physical luxury of a Beit Arazim, a cedar palace for the king, but also a sense of permanence of one king after another from the same royal line, that's the time for Hashem to say, okay, now I too need to settle down, so to speak, in a permanent home. And so when he says, David, you're not going to build it, but your son will, he emphasizes twice how the son is going to be firmly established. Hachinoti et mamlachto. L'chon antir kisei mamlachto ad olam. Ad olam in Tanakh means forever. And once there's this permanent dynasty of Beit David, then and only then can I have a palace of mine, meaning a temple, a Beit HaMikdash. And so David, as the founding king of the dynasty, can't build the Beit HaMikdash because if David built it, it wouldn't be the palace of a dynasty. It's only going to be the Beit HaMikdash built by a dynasty once David's son succeeds him, and then you have a dynasty. So just to sum up, it seems like from Sefer Shmuel, Hashem says, look, I don't need a temple at all. In the past, just like we had human leaders where in every generation a new leader arose from a different family, some sort of a shofet or a navi, so too, I moved around from place to place and that never bothered me. I don't need a palace. But if you think that with the transition to monarchy, now's the time for me to have a palace, a Beit HaMikdash, that's fine, but only once the monarchy is established as a dynasty, and that's only going to be when your son takes over. Interestingly, we then asked against our own approach, what about the fact that in Divrei Hayamim, David tells Shlomo a different reason? V'emer David l'Shlomo v'no, ani hayam le'avi livnot bayit l'Hashem Elokai. David says to Shlomo, it was in my heart, I wished to build a home for Hashem. You saw that in Shmuel, right? But David says, you know why I didn't do it? V'hi alai dvar Hashem le'mor, dam larov shafachta, u'milchamot gedolot asita, lo tivna bayit l'shmi, ki damim rabim shafachta arza lefanai. So David says, Hashem told me I couldn't build the Beit HaMikdash because I spilled too much blood. And so how come Shlomo, you will be able to? Because Shlomo is going to be a person of rest, meaning of peace. God says Shlomo is going to have peace and rest from all his enemies. The plan word, his name is going to be Shlomo, and there's going to be shalom in his days. And so he's going to build the temple. And again, his kingship is going to be firmly established. This resembles what Natan said earlier in this idea of Shlomo's throne being established, but it adds this element of peace versus war, that David was a man of war who spilled lots of blood, and Shlomo was a man of peace. So wait a minute. When we looked earlier in Shmuel Bet, we didn't see anything here about war and peace. Why is David giving a somewhat different reason to Shlomo as to why David couldn't build the temple? So Radak is bothered by this. Radak says, Dam larov shafachta, ze lo matzanu she'amar lo Hashem. We never saw Hashem tell him this. So David Amar Kain B'libo. Maybe David just kind of made this up himself. He somehow interpreted it. He just kind of assumed that Hashem prevented him from building the temple because of this. Oh, Natan Navi Amar lo Kain. He said, Radak says, maybe, you know what? Maybe Natan told him this too. Maybe Natan also told him you couldn't build the Beit HaMikdash because of war. Now wait a minute. Didn't say that in Shmuel Bet. So Radak admits that. He says, Afal pi shelo nichtav b'sefer Shmuel, even though it wasn't written in the book of Shmuel that God told Natan to tell David not to build the temple because David fought too many wars. There are many examples like that. And he gives another example which we didn't study in depth. You may know it from the Chumash, that Moshe says about the spies, about the Meraglim, that the people said, we want to send Meraglim. If you read this original story in Parshat Shlach, the people don't ask for spies there. Yet when Moshe retells the story, he mentions they did ask for spies. So apparently sometimes when someone retells the story, they include details that are true, but were missing from the original narrative. So here's what Radak seems to be concluding by saying that maybe Natan HaNavi got a second Nevuah, which is not included in the book of Shmuel, but gave David this additional reason why he can't build the temple. So that seems to be Radak's conclusion, that David was told everything we saw in Shmuel about how Hashem doesn't need a home, and if he's going to have one, he wants it to be built by a king from a dynasty. And on top of all that, Hashem also said, David, you also can't build the Beit HaMikdash because you fought too many wars. That seems to be Radak's conclusion. We suggested something different that sounds a little bit more like what the Radak had touched upon earlier, that maybe David sort of interpreted the Nevuah in Shmuel Bet as also including the element of war. In other words, the way we suggested, the only thing Hashem said to David was the stuff that we saw in Shmuel Bet. He's told Natan to tell David that I don't really need a Beit HaMikdash, and if it's going to be built, it should be by a king from a dynasty, someone whose kingship is firmly established. However, David on his own understood or interpreted that part of why David's own rule was not as firmly established as Shlomo is because David lived in a time of instability when there were many wars. And the way that Shlomo was able to then live in a time of peace was that David's wars made a lot of the neighbors scared of him. We saw the example of Yoav, David's general, massacring Edom, and then Edom doesn't want to mess with Shlomo until they realize that Yoav's dead. So perhaps David injected this element of war into Natan's Nevuah because he understood that part of what was being hinted to by him being told you're not so firmly established, the kid who's going to will be firmly established, is that your wars, which you're fighting, which lead to instability in your time, but they're going to set the stage for greater stability in Shlomo's time. Because by winning these wars, in your time, neighboring countries will not want to attack Shlomo.